Hello, friends. I'm no therapist, but I'm your host, Stephanie Goodman. I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and a woman of faith. Often friends ask me how I have a successful marriage while blending families and staying optimistic in life. This podcast features people with real-life stories about success in relationships and triumph over trial. Is it possible to have a divorce and then co-parent peacefully? My guest, Joe Peck, host of the podcast The Impeckable Perspective, shared his experience of co-parenting with his former spouse and the benefits of honesty while re-entering the dating scene. Hello and welcome to another episode of I'm No Therapist. But today I have with me a dear friend whom we met a couple of years ago when I attended just an event where we were able to kind of stretch our acting muscles. My dear friend is Joe Peck.
Hello, hello. And by a couple of years, you mean 15.
Is that real? 15.
I don't even
15
know.
years?
I don't even want to think about that.
It's so
but
crazy.
It was a wonderful opportunity and a great time, and we forged many friendships from that.
Yes,
that whole group. Yeah, I'm very grateful for that.
And I'm grateful for social media that we can continue to stay connected, keep that friendship.
Oh, yeah. Very blessed to have the way to stay in touch with people all over the world instantly.
This is true.
I know. What's
I'm
next?
very grateful to be living in this era of time as well, because I know for me, my ADHD brain, I'm getting through books now because there's such a thing as audiobooks.
Yeah.
And podcasts have been fantastic.
And medication.
For me.
For that. I know.
Vitamins.
You wouldn't make it as a pioneer, dear. I hate to break it to you, but that was not your era.
This is
so
is your
true.
Era. Indeed.
Oh, I know. Well, could you imagine anybody living on the planet right now back in those times? You know, they wouldn't survive.
They would not survive.
They're so soft. We are, and it's interesting to see, and it's I find it fascinating when we look at the challenges that we face with being on the earth at this time, with all of the advancements in technology, all of the conveniences, the abundance of everything we have. We never want for anything.
Yes.
And compared to even just a few hundred years ago, where people struggled physically, right, for their own well-being, struggled for their daily substance and all the things that they need, where we don't worry about, growing our own food or things like that, but we're fighting a spiritual struggle and a spiritual war, where people were back then were fighting more of a physical kind of war. So it's a different kind of thing. And, it's interesting to think that maybe people from 200 or 300 years ago, if they were living today and they were the same person, if they would struggle with everything going on in the world today, with the spiritual and all the things that they never had to deal with before. Yeah, it's very fascinating.
I think so.
Yeah, we were kind of saved for this this time in history, and who knows what's next?
Right. So that leads me into a slight introduction. Mm-hmm. I'd love for you to share with my audiences more about what you do. Namely, tell us about your podcast.
Okay, sure. So I am originally from Canada. That's definitely a big part of who I am, and very proud of that. I've been in the U.S. for a long time, but originally from the east coast of Canada, from Nova Scotia. And I had moved to the U.S. when I got married and lived in Utah for 20 years, and then moved to Arizona, where I currently live. And I am an HR professional. I'm an executive technical recruiter by trade, working in the tech industry for that. And I'm a convert to the church, and I was an adult convert. I was 26 when I discovered the gospel through my ex-wife, and I was introduced to it that way. And I was a golden contact, believe it or not.
Really?
I was. That's what they tell me. Yeah, because
golden contact.
Yeah. So I just took to it right away, and I was first of all getting to know my ex and getting to know the church a little bit, and asking when we were dating, asking a lot of questions about the religion, and I had never heard of it before, right? And it was fascinating. I grew up as a Catholic, and we were practicing or active in our faith, so religion was kind of on my mind. And I did have a baby testimony of the Savior. I didn't realize what it was, but I believed it. So now I know that I did have a testimony growing up. And so I was fascinated by it. And so I just kept asking a lot of questions. And it got to the point where she's just like, you need to meet with the missionaries. I can't answer your questions anymore.
Oh my.
So I did. And from the first meeting with the missionaries to my baptism was 3 weeks, and I was in just like that.
Wow.
Yeah, I just knew. I just knew it was.
So you grew up Catholic in Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia.
Oh, Scotia?
Scotia.
Nova Scotia.
That's correct.
I haven't been there yet. It is definitely on my board of travels.
It's a beautiful place. You would love it. It's a beautiful place to travel to. Absolutely.
Is it cold? Warm?
Yeah, it's a lot like New England. Right, it's the same because it's just north of Boston. Basically, it's just up the coast from. So if you think about Boston or New York or anywhere in the northeast of the United States, it's really very, very similar to that in terms of weather and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it's not bad. The summers are nice and everything, 4 full seasons and whatnot. But go visit in the summer and early fall is the best time. To go.
That's
for
good
sure.
to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have family from Canada, Ontario, Canada.
Really? Is that right?
Yeah.
Do you know what part of Ontario?
It would be my great-grandparents are from Ontario, Canada.
Yeah. Well, I lived in Ontario before I moved to the States. After college, I started working in Ontario and then moved to the States. So yeah, and I have a brother and a sister, and my mom is just moving to Toronto. So they all live in Toronto now, and two nephews there. And yeah, it's Ontario's a great place. So there you have it. So lots of experience there as well. So yeah, that was kind of that. I just took to it right away and knew just in my heart that was what I was looking for, and I had no questions about the truthfulness of it. It just all made sense to me.
And this is what has kind of been the seed for your podcast, correct?
Yeah, it is basically, right? So I just have started a podcast about 6 months ago, and I co-host with my friend Luann Roundy, who's also has been my marriage counselor. And so we've known each other for about 3 years now. I've been divorced for about 2.5. And we both have a very similar take on the gospel. She grew up in the church and all of that and everything. She's very much really engrossed in the gospel, and she's excellent in terms of gospel knowledge and everything like that. She's very well versed in that, and we are both overthinkers, and we dive deep into gospel topics all the time when we talk. So when we were having our sessions for counseling, we would just get into gospel topics and talk all about it. And so I had the idea for the podcast for a couple of years, and I kind of started a couple of years ago just on my own and got a few episodes done. And it just, with life and things, it kind of got shelved, but I always had the idea of it. And so I ended up talking to her about it, and we decided to do it together and kind of put our minds together to create an even better resource for people to, and it works incredibly well just because with so my perspective as a convert and then her perspective as a therapist, right, and dealing with all the kinds of things that you deal with.
She is a therapist.
But well, I guess she has her own podcast too, so I don't know if there's a but there, but but she's a real legit therapist. That's right. So there you go. And so between us, it works really, really well, and we dive deep in gospel topics. So the podcast is it's called the Impeccable Perspective, and it's basically
I love the name of that, especially playing on your name being Joe Peck.
Right.
Now you've got Impeccable Perspective.
Right.
Will you dive into how that came about?
How the name came about?
Yes.
For sure. Well, I came up with that name, Impeccable. So it's if you take the word impeccable and it has my last name in it, so it's IMPECKABLE instead of PECC. That I came up with that name. It was like 2002. It's weird that I would remember that, but that's when I just got the domain for it and kind of got that name so I could have it. I was thinking about it for filmmaking and using it for that. And
sure.
Impeccable Films was my film kind of company, all that kind of stuff.
I actually have one of your
business cards.
You
probably do. I know.
Yeah.
I was giving them out like crazy. I know, that's funny. Yeah. So that name has kind of always stuck with me. So everything that I've done kind of put that Impeccable name on it. And so it's Impeccable Perspective is the name of the podcast, and it is my perspective on the gospel as a convert. and seeing it. And again, I was 26 when I joined. I obviously grew up in Utah. I didn't grow up in the church. So everything about growing up in the gospel was foreign to me. But at the same time, it gave me a very unique perspective because I'm coming into the church, looking at all of this stuff, seeing how people are raised in the church, seeing how the culture affects people, and how people live their lives as members of the church, especially in Utah, and how strange it is and how different it is, and comparing it to how I grew up. And it gave me a very unique perspective on things. Mm-hmm. But there's we talk about the traditions of man, right? That's in the scriptures, that kind of thing. That's what the culture is kind of made up of. It's just these traditions that have been passed down for generation after generation after generation, where people don't even know why they do certain things anymore. They just do them because that's what we've always done, and they're wrong.
I have a perfect story about doing something you don't know why you're doing it.
Tell me.
So there was a woman who would cut her pot roast in a certain amount. Mm-hmm. She'd have the pot roast, right? And then she'd cut off the ends and she'd put it in the pot roast. And at one point, her mother asked her, "Why do you do that?" And she said, "Well, I've always done that. It's what Grandma does, right? Mm-hmm. This is what I do." Well, they happened to be in a conversation with Grandma and find out the reason why Grandma would cut the pot like that mm-hmm. was because it needed to fit in her pot roast.
Her pan,
yes.
Her pan was too small. So.
All these years later, she'd been blindlessly following this tradition that made sense for one person.
Right. People lose track of the real purpose of all of this. And it just becomes, we talk on my podcast, we talk a lot about the checklist, right? And this is what it's all about, the checklist, because people's mindset is there's an entire checklist you have to follow. If you do all of these things, you'll get to the social kingdom.
Happily ever after,
It's like that, yeah. And the problem is they're following, and the checklist is made up of very good things, right? The checklist is things like saying daily prayer and scripture study, right? And being a good person and going to the temple, and whatever it is on your list, whatever you're fulfilling your callings, right? Yeah. All of these things. These are good things to do, right? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. The problem is they're doing these things out of fear instead of out of love for God.
We're in a different season where we're starting to understand how important it is to have a personal relationship with our Heavenly Father, mm-hmm. that we are recognizing our value as a daughter or son mm-hmm. of God.
Absolutely.
And that we're trying to do the best that we can. And I love that we are learning also, like you said, the Stepford wives mm-hmm. being that perfectionism, there is no perfection.
No.
Perfection is pure fiction. It's not meant for us to be perfect in this life because we don't have all the things we need to have.
It's not possible for us, but there's a standard that's set again by the culture, I believe, that there is the commandment, let's call it, to be perfect, right? We're commanded to be perfect, and people think they have a shot at that, or they think they have to be, and it creates all kinds of weird behavior with people. It's like you just have to understand you're never going to be perfect, and that's okay. That's mm-hmm. not what it is. If you can just get better and better little by little as you go through your life, you're on the road to perfection.
So Joe, if you don't mind, share with me where your relationship was and where it is now, and what kind of perspective have you had from that experience?
Okay. It's been a very interesting journey. As I mentioned, I was married for 25 years, and it was a very, very healthy, very successful marriage overall. We, as I mentioned, I joined the church, and I got married about 7 months after I got baptized, and we just had a civil marriage because we couldn't get married in the temple then. At that point, I had not been a member for a year. And then we waited and got sealed on our first anniversary, which was fun, and all of that. And so at the time, like coming from a life outside the church is a difficult situation to be in.
Okay.
And the very first episode of my podcast is my conversion story. It talks all about all of this kind of stuff. I won't go into all of that now because it's a long story, but it's all there if you want to check it out. But basically just living in the world, right? Being very much of the world, right? Because that's all you know. Like I literally hadn't heard of the church before and didn't really understand the gospel. And so all you know at that point is what you see around you. Right? You don't have any perspective of pre-existence, eternities, nothing like that. Okay. So it's just whatever's here on the earth. So I'm just living this lifestyle, and I'm doing all the things that the world tells you will make you successful and happy, right? And it's a lot of just throwaway relationships and just casual sex, for example, and just selfishness, right? And you're just doing because this is what they say makes you happy, right? It's just just kind of live this lifestyle. That's just like everybody does that, and partying and very selfish types of things and focuses in your life and all that kind of stuff. And it's not happiness. It's not happiness at all. And I always wanted to be married and have a family, but I would never marry the women I was dating because it was just about sex, basically, right? It was just these throwaway relationships that didn't have any substance to them, any value. Because that's what you think is happiness, and it's wrong. But that's what the world teaches you. Okay. Very interesting to see how clever Satan is when when you don't understand the gospel, how easy it is to influence you that way. In fact, I talk about just about that. It's an interesting perspective because I say. We're fighting a war, and you don't know you're fighting a war, I think, until you really join the church and understand that that's a real thing, because most people don't think Satan even exists, right? Let alone, but we know that we're fighting a war, but when you don't have the gospel in your life, you have no idea you're at war, right? And so my thing is like, well, how can you ever win a battle when you don't even know you're at war? Mm-hmm. Right? And so you have no chance.
How do you prepare for battle if you have no idea?
You don't realize you're in battle. You don't even realize there's a war going on. Yeah. You have no idea. So how do you ever win? How do you ever overcome that? And so that's kind of the situation you're in before you join the church. And so I met my ex, and she grew up in the church and was very lovely and wonderful and just kind of represented the type of person I wanted to be with. But was not the kind of woman that I had been with at all. And so I saw an opportunity there. So we went through, I got baptized, we went through our courtship, and we ended up getting married. And we have 4 kids and just beautiful children, really, really healthy marriage. And I wouldn't say that she was a product of the culture of the church. It was very much heavily influenced in that. But there's a lot of differences, right, growing up in the church like that and being fully active your whole life. And I lived a crazy lifestyle before the church, right? And so, my experiences were way different from hers in a lot of areas. And so we were very happy. And as I mentioned, we have a very successful marriage, and it wasn't, nothing bad happened. Like, I'm really lucky in a sense, like there was no infidelity, there was no, crazy kinds of, I don't know, just like, people go through all kinds of, I don't even know. Like, it's just lots of bad things happen in relationships. We never had any of that. We're still very, very close and very good friends today, and we take care of the kids, and we're committed to doing what the kids need, and we sacrifice for them like we always have. And there's no selfishness, and there's no one is using anything against each other. No one's trying to turn the kids against the other person. It's very, very healthy, and I almost don't
That's
even.
amazing.
I know it is. It's very rare. I don't even really tell people about it because most people get jealous. Because most people have had a lot of bad things happen in there. That's why they're divorced. But for us, it was different, and so we had. I'd moved to Arizona and for work, and basically ended up that my ex didn't want to move. So we were living in Utah, and her family is there, and she grew up there, and her whole life was there, and she didn't want to leave that. And so we ended up being separated for years, for a few years, trying to make it work. And excuse me, eventually it wasn't going to work and wasn't going to change. The situation wasn't going to change, and she didn't want to support me, supporting the family, and come to Arizona. And I didn't want to move back to Utah and take a lesser paying job and things like that, because it wasn't, because we had bills to pay and things like that. And so anyway, that was kind of the beginning of the process, and we ended up getting divorced. And what I noticed, though, after time and after counseling and things like that, that we had really lost our connection, was what it was, I think. And that's the reason that she really didn't want to leave her comfort zone, and her family and everything, where she got all her support, because we had slowly over time kind of not communicated as much as we need to, and kind of let that lapse. And I take ownership of that, because I was kind of the first, I think, to sort of become disenchanted with the thing. And I had changed and wanted different things out of life at that point. This is 25 years later after marriage, right? And she is very much someone who likes to remain in the status quo, she's very much a traditional kind of person and doesn't like risk and change and things like that. And so she's very happy being in her life, doing all the traditions, all the things with her family and all these things that she wants to do. And nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But I kind of found myself wanting more out of life, and it was just sort of this same repeatable kind of, year. Every year was kind of the same over and over. We always do the same vacations with the same people and the same traditions for every holiday and all these kinds of things, which again, it's nice and safe, and we have a wonderful family, and I'm very grateful for the all of her family and the support that they show my children. Right, my children have wonderful relationships with their cousins and their aunts and uncles, and it's a beautiful support there, which they need and they love, and it's great. I would never take that away. That's a wonderful thing. But I just kind of felt like I needed more, so I became more disenchanted, and it wasn't really the life that I wanted to live for myself at that point. And so we kind of grew apart that way. And from growing up in a strict Catholic home, I developed a kind of a mechanism of shutting down when I am upset or angry or whatever it is like that. I don't really talk a lot, and I kind of brought that into my marriage, and that was a problem.
Now, does that happen for a couple of days at a time, hours? What do you think?
It just depends. It just happens circumstantially, right? Whenever something's going on, if we're fighting or something's happening or we're having money problems or whatever the case is, I'll just kind of shut down. And I don't know, it won't last terribly long, really. It just depends on this, but maybe within a day kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it was just sort of my go-to there, and I just get quiet, and I just kind of withdraw.
Okay.
And that's not healthy. And, so for example, when we were having problems, like I'd lost jobs over the years and financial stress, and I really wouldn't talk about it or really wouldn't tell her much about what was going on, because my rationale was I'm protecting her from, let me take on this challenge and take care of it because I'm the provider. I should do that. You're busy with the kids. I don't want to stress you out. I want to, you need to run the house and take care of the kids. I don't want to add all this extra stress. I will just go and figure it out. I'll go get another job. I'll figure out the money. But so I was trying to protect her from all of that. That was my intention, not realizing by not communicating, you're creating a gap.
Right.
And shutting her out. That's what I was doing. And so I learned a lot.
You were invisibly building a wall, not realizing that that's what you were doing.
I was right, exactly. I was just like, listen, I will just take all of this on, all the stress, all the responsibility of figuring this out, and you just do what you do as a wife and a mother, and don't even worry about it. Let me just take care of this. But that was my intention, but it kind of realized later that the effect was bad, and we stopped communicating, and you create these walls, you create these gaps, and she doesn't know what's going on, and I wouldn't tell her, and that was, it was bad. And so that was kind of the beginning of the breakdown, and it just was a slow drip over many, many years, right? And again, it didn't turn into anything bad, but we just kind of realized that we had lost our connection, and we were in the situation. And here's my theory on all of that. This is kind of an interesting thing. I have no idea if this is right or not, but because I knew without a doubt that I needed to move to Arizona for this job. That was one of those things, when it's God's plan, when it's right, it just all falls into place.
Yeah.
You just know.
Yes.
That's what this situation was for me.
Okay.
And so I knew I had to be there. But then when she didn't want to move and follow me, that created a rift in my marriage. All of a sudden, so I'm thinking, well, I knew I'm supposed to be here, but now my marriage is in trouble, and I know God doesn't want me to get divorced. So why is this happening? This doesn't make sense to me at all. What's going on? So after just like thinking and trying to figure things out, the theory that I have is our marriage, the way it was not a celestial marriage, right? I mean, yes, we were married in the temple, and yes, we had temple recommends we were worthy and all that kind of stuff, but our relationship wasn't celestial.
Okay.
Right?
Oh, I like that.
It wasn't. The relationship itself wasn't celestial because we had these communication problems, and we weren't. And by the end of it, we were like roommates, right? That's really what it evolved to, and that's not a good situation at all. And so, but that's how we were living. We were just content. We were just going through the motions in some cases and just having these problems. So that's not a celestial relationship. And if I hadn't moved to Arizona, I think I'd still be in that situation because it wasn't bad enough to get a divorce, right? But I wasn't happy. And so my theory is that God said, okay, well, look, this isn't going to work for eternity because you're not in love anymore. You don't have the connection that you need to have for a really successful eternal marriage. So I'm going to create a situation where you guys resolve this because now you're just on a hamster wheel. You won't change the situation. You just keep going over and over and staying in the situation. So I'm going to create a situation where you're separated, right? And you can't stay married in the situation because it doesn't work. You can't live in two different states. I was, first of all, working 2 jobs to try and pay 2 sets of bills to support a family of 6. and I could really only afford to actually take time off and afford to come to Utah every couple of months. So I was spending 4 weeks a year with my family for 4 years.
4 weeks.
4 weeks
a year.
Yeah, a week, 5 days here, a week there, whatever. Over the course of a year, the total was about 4 weeks that I would actually physically be with my family. The rest of it, I'm working 7 days a week. I'm living alone in an apartment. It's not a good situation. How do you maintain a marriage like that, right? So I think that God put us in that situation, and He is like, okay, so now you're in a situation where I'm forcing you to make a choice. You're either going to get together and make this eternal marriage work and commit to it, or you're going to get divorced and find someone else to have that marriage with, because this is not working, and I love you too much to let you do that. Wow. So again, that's a reason I came up with my overthinking brain as to why this happened, because it didn't make sense to me. Like, why would I definitely know that I'm supposed to move and take this job, but then it created this problem with my marriage? Why would that happen? That was not confirmed that that's the answer to me, but I think it makes a lot of sense to me, and that's just my own thing. So, and that's what happened. And so, we ended up getting divorced, but again, it was very amicable and wonderful in the sense that we both understood, and I'm still taking care of them and helping her transition into kind of supporting herself eventually and taking care of the kids. And I come back and we spend time together and we hang out with the kids and just do our thing, and it's just really wonderful, and there's no weirdness at all with it. But I didn't understand how damaged people are out there when I started getting out and dating post-divorce and realizing not everybody has a really happy divorce, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Right? Most people have a lot of problems, and there's major issues there, and people have been manipulated and hurt and cheated on, and you have a lot of women who are out there who aren't ready to date, but they're trying to date because they need to heal, and they're not healing. And so I learned a lot about those kinds of things the hard way. Yeah, it is. And it's because I'm coming, like, I haven't had a bad relationship in my life in terms of manipulation and abuse or anything like that really messes people up. I never had that, which I'm grateful for. My parents stayed married the whole time, and we had a very normal family life growing up. There wasn't anything like that in it, and so I just didn't really have a reference point for that. I was very naive in terms of experiencing those kinds of things in relationships.
Right. And
then you get out there and you start meeting people. It's like, oh my gosh, he did that to you? Yeah, I can't believe some of the things that people did. Either to mostly guys doing horrible things to their wives, but wives aren't. They've done things too. They're not completely innocent, but it's just the things that people do to each other. I can't even understand it. How do you even do it? It's funny to me because I look at people. At one point you two were so in love, you were willing to commit your lives together and live together.
Correct.
And now you hate each other, and now you use the kids against each other.
Yeah.
Now you steal from each other. Now you try to hurt each other. How does it happen? How does it get to that point? It's sad. It's so sad.
So in looking forward to a new relationship, I mean, you were very fortunate to have
it's true.
A congenial relationship. Like you said, not everybody has that opportunity.
No.
But that's a good thing, because you can at least take the things that you learned from that relationship and say, this is what I'm looking for in my future relationship, right?
Absolutely. So one of those biggest takeaways for me is communication, right? I through counseling and really just looking back on everything, I really realized that I do have this go-to mechanism where I just shut down. That was always been a go-to for me from growing up in a really strict Catholic home. I kind of developed that as a child in response to just having a really strict mother, right? That kind of a thing. And that's all fine now. My mom and I are great, and we have a wonderful relationship. But I developed this mechanism to just shut down when I'm not happy or whatever, when I'm fighting with somebody or whatever the case is. And so I learned, first of all, that I have this, right? And I learned that it causes problems. And so now I have committed to being completely open, transparent, and honest in my communication with people in a relationship. And that's great. That's what you need to have a successful relationship.
Isn't that amazing how uncomfortable that skill can be?
Oh yeah, it is crazy. I mean, it's people don't want to be honest and be transparent because they're afraid of hurting someone else, but you don't realize how much more damaging it is. And one thing that I've learned, and this wasn't from my marriage, I learned this after my marriage with someone that I was involved with and am involved with, let's say, And it's something tremendous about honesty. And she would tell me, listen, be completely honest no matter what you do. Anything. You cheat on me, you do whatever it is. Be completely honest with me and transparent so that I can choose what to do about this. Instead of not telling me, thinking you're protecting me by not telling me.
Yeah.
Tell me everything.
That's
and
interesting.
let me decide if I want to continue with the relationship or if I don't want to continue with the relationship. And that really changed perspective for me a lot. This was really profound to me. Like, this woman is incredible. And it really just changed everything, because I was always afraid, to be honest, because I don't want you to get mad at me. I don't want to tell you that I did this or did that, or I spent this money when I shouldn't have, or this happened, or I lost my job or whatever, because you don't want to upset someone. You don't want to bring that stress into your life, but it just percolates and blows up later, even worse.
Right.
And you should give someone that opportunity to decide where things go. So that's another great thing that I learned.
I really enjoy that.
It's cool. It's very interesting. Yeah,
I would say
wonderful.
that's a big part of when Kels and I were dating, was that we were completely honest with what we'd experienced, what our expectations were, and then being married, there are situations where, like you say, you could hold on to those secrets in effort to protect someone. But if it's small and you hold on to it, it grows.
It can grow. It does. It really does. Yeah. And you may not think that it has any relevance in your new relationship or whatnot. And I don't know. I don't demand someone tell me everything about their past. I don't care. Like, what, your relationship before you met me are none of my business, as far as I'm concerned. If you feel like I should know something about your past because that's going to help us, then tell me, by all means.
I appreciate that.
Oh, for sure, yeah. But if you think that something happened in your past that would only harm our relationship moving forward, you don't have to tell me that. I'm not going to demand that you tell me all these things. I don't know. It just kind of depends. But because some stuff is just irrelevant and doesn't matter anymore. Yeah. But I might take it personally or take it the wrong way. If whatever it might be, but it has no relevance, and so you might just risk. It just depends. I guess that's a judgment call on your own.
It really is.
Yeah, for sure.
And it depends on where you are in your relationship.
Totally.
In discovering.
Yeah, it is. It's a process, and you just come out with all your dirty laundry on your first date. That's not a good idea.
No,
Don't recommend that.
That's not a good idea.
Not a good idea.
This is true.
Just ease into that kind of stuff. But as you develop a relationship, communication should be completely open and honest and transparent, and be strong enough and confident enough to know that's like, listen, that will strengthen that's the thing I notice, is that will strengthen things more than you know, and you'll work through those issues together if you're just completely honest. And honestly, I think women just say, I don't necessarily care as much about what you did, but if more so than you just being honest with me. Like, I just want you to be honest about everything, and we can probably work through it in most cases, right? But if you're not honest, that's the problem. So you don't care what you did, it's the fact that you weren't honest. And that's something I learned the hard way, but you learn, right? And that's what it's all about, and I'm okay with that, because it's all part of my own personal growth.
That's something that you would do differently in an upcoming relationship, is to be more honest.
More transparent,
right,
and then over communicate. So I'm very focused on that now. That's very much because I'm very self-aware of the fact that I do kind of shut down and withdraw.
Which is powerful, to recognize your weaknesses.
You can't
right?
fix it until you do, right?
Correct.
And I'm not too ashamed to admit it's like, we all have weaknesses. We all have problems that we have to work on. Figure them out, see what they are, and then start working on them. And so now I'm very much complete opposite of that. I don't withdraw at all, or if I do, I catch it and really try to just work through it right away, that kind of stuff. But I go out of my way to over communicate. I kind of sometimes wonder if that's too much for someone, right? I'm just not that I'm telling inappropriate things or personal things or whatever, but just just very clear, talking through everything and just over communicating basically. But I think people appreciate that more than not, because it's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I know, it's crazy. Learned a lot about red flags also.
Oh, yeah?
Right. Oh, yeah.
You've learned to recognize red flags? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, yeah. Right. So there's...
and has this been through experience, or is this because of being able to interact with your co-host?
Both.
Who is Luann, right?
Luann, correct. That's right. Yeah, exactly. And so it both for sure. I would experience things in a relationship and not really realize there were red flags, and then talk to her about that, and she's like, "That's a red flag." And here's
Really?
yeah, oh for sure, yeah, of course. And then
Can you share some examples of that?
yeah. So I dated a woman a year and a half ago, and she had a couple of marriages, and and 4 kids and everything like that, and wonderful, like a beautiful woman, really wonderful. We connected instantly, like just instantly right away, and it was really good that way. You know what I mean? Like you just kind of know there's just a connection that you have, right? You can just talk about everything, and you want to talk about things. You never stop talking. Like it's just a great connection that way with her. And she had been through some problems with her relationships. Her first marriage, there was like porn addiction, and I don't know, there might have been infidelity, but definitely a serious porn problem, things like that. And her second marriage was a rebound marriage,
Which is a big secret.
It's a huge. Oh my gosh, it's huge.
Hold.
Like, it's terrible. Oh yeah, but I mean, it's so prevalent.
It's toxic.
Out there. It's toxic. It's terrible. And then there was a rebound marriage after that just wasn't very long at all, and just bad news. And then dated someone again for a couple of years, and all 3 of these people were manipulators. And so after 20 years of being manipulated, you become a good manipulator yourself, right?
Oh, okay.
So yeah, and so what was happening was that she had broken up with the boyfriend that she dated for 2 years, and he had proposed, and I think, and then left her at the altar, basically, kind of thing, and broke it off a couple times, and just like, so she was done with all of that apparently, and so a friend of mine set us up, and so. I was smitten. I really was. And we connected so well, and there's such a great attraction there. I really wanted it to work, And this is, again, long enough ago that I was still pretty naive to these things and hadn't had a lot of experience with these kinds of situations. And the one thing that kept coming up was this ex-boyfriend kept kind of calling her and contacting her. And, and she was adamant that they were done, right? She was done with this. This was done. This is so just not for her at all. In fact, she even told me, even if things don't work out with us, I would never go back to that guy.
Okay.
That's great. But
so that's pretty solid.
It seemed like it, very solid. But he would, call and whatever, and she would sometimes answer and say, no, I'm seeing someone, I'm not interested, or just not answer, whatever. And she would tell me that he called or this and that, which is good.
Yeah, that's honesty.
But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, if you're really truly done with this guy, why don't you just block him? Like, you don't have kids together, you have no reason to talk to him. There's nothing, you don't have anything together in your relationship that would keep you talking to him in any way.
Yes.
But you never ever would, at all. And then, so we dated for about 3 months, and she started having second thoughts and started thinking, well, I don't know if maybe I still have feelings for this guy and I have feelings for you, and I don't know what I want to do. Maybe I don't want to be with anybody. It got confusing and messy and everything. So we took a break, and then a couple weeks later we got together, and she basically broke it off, right? And then, so this
broke
was
it off with him?
Me.
With you?
Yeah, officially.
She broke it off with you.
We're done, yeah. And that was it. She didn't say anything about him. But
okay.
It's like, hey, we're done. And so that was kind of that. It's like, well, okay, if that's what it is, that's what it is. And
was that your first experience with being
I would say
let go of?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I dated a few other people, but short kind of things. This was like 3 months or so. So that was kind of at the point, kind of the longest, So
okay.
yeah. So the other stuff was just sort of dating.
So the heart was involved.
Oh, it was involved. Yeah. I let it get involved for sure, and I do that. I do let my heart get involved. I'm very much a romantic, and I just love, the idea of being in love and all these things. And sometimes you don't let logic into the picture, right? When you do that.
This is true.
That's a thing that I dealt with. So anyway, so she breaks up with me. Okay, and then let me see. That was okay. So here's what happened next. That was it. We were done. Stopped communicating. That's over. Okay, great. That's fine. 3.5 weeks later, I'm actually here in Utah visiting my kids. It was General Conference weekend.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, and this is Monday morning after conference, right? I take out my phone. I get up and whatever. I open up my phone and I just go to Instagram, and the very first thing at the top of my feed was a picture of her at a wedding.
Okay.
Right? And I'm thinking, oh, that's funny. Whose wedding is? So my first question is, whose wedding is that?
Yeah, right.
And then the second question is, why is she wearing white?
This was her wedding.
Yes, to
the boyfriend.
Yes, 100%. I'm scrolling through the pictures, like 10 pictures. I'm scrolling through the pictures, like, oh my gosh, that's him. What? They just got married in the temple, in the Gilbert Temple, 3.5 weeks after she officially, with me,
split it with you,
officially said we're done. And so I started doing the timeline, because this was during COVID, right?
Yeah.
And at that time, the temples were open, but they were only doing one sealing at a time, right? That's it. That's all that was allowed in the temple. So there was like a 2 to 3 month waiting list to even book, right? So if she
there was.
There was. I'm telling you, there was for sure.
I know.
So if she got married,
in the temple,
in the temple,
at
the beginning of October, conference weekend, right, the very 1st of October.
Yeah.
When did she actually book that? We'll count back 2 months. So this was October. She officially cut it off with me September the 6th. It's weird that I remember the dates, but it's a whole timeline thing, right? That was our last conversation. She said, "That's it, we're done." And then, so that was September the 6th.
Yeah.
And so 2 months back, you get into July. Okay, but so if she booked her wedding then for October, she must have already, agreed to get married. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, well, if that happened then, when did she actually agree to get? Why? Yeah, exactly. Because we broke up at the beginning of September,
and you had 3 months with her in a relationship,
right? But so she booked her wedding then, but she still had to get back with the guy and then agree to marry him again, right? So when did that happen? So did she ever break up with him? I don't know. I don't know. It just didn't even. But I didn't recognize those red flags all along. This guy was still in the picture, and she was, just saying this but doing that, because I was in love with her, kind of thing. I wanted this to work badly enough that I didn't recognize any of these red flags.
Isn't that crazy that love can be so blind?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's sad because that's it's kind of manipulation too, and it's sad to see someone do that, and it's sad that they think that this is okay to do, right? And it's how they are. But that's what happens when you just spend so half of your life in relationships with manipulators who do these things to you. That's kind of what happens. But I was naive to all of that. I didn't I've never experienced anything like that before, right? With people, my relationships are always pretty much, pretty good overall that way. And so, lesson learned. But boy, I felt so foolish though when I saw that, because I literally had no idea they were getting married until I saw those pictures after the wedding was over. Had no idea. I literally didn't even sense it. How did you not know that, So it was, so I don't know, it's kind of crazy, but I just learned a lot about myself, and I just became much better at recognizing red flags and then kind of calling them out too, right? And saying, hey, this doesn't look right or sound right, or what does this mean? What does that mean? And so I'm much more, vocal about that. And, if there's red flags there, I'm not going to stay in the relationship because someone's not ready to be in a relationship if you have healing to do.
Correct. Yeah.
You're not.
And that's a tough thing to do because you are in a world where a lot of hurt has happened. And
I know.
There's a lot of self-reflection.
Yeah, there is. And it's not a bad thing people get hurt usually because of the choices of other people, right? And I'm not saying you're a bad person because, you were married and somebody cheated on you and now you have some emotional healing to do. That's not your fault. It's not a bad thing. You're not a bad person.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is listen, if you do need to heal, you need to do that first before you get into another relationship, a committed relationship with somebody, because you're not ready to commit everything to that person and have a healthy, normal relationship. You have to heal first.
Joe, thank you for choosing to share your time with us.
You're
welcome.
Thank
you for being open to sharing your story. And I hope that your podcast will continue to thrive, because we need that. We need to be able to have that voice of recognition and allowing us to be in the church, in the world, but not of the world.
Mm-hmm. But still in the world, so you got to be wise.
And having that perspective.
Yes,
that impeccable perspective.
Yes, that's right.
So how can my audience reach out to you and support you?
Okay, so first of all, if you want to listen to the podcast, it's available pretty much anywhere podcasts are sold, kind of thing, right? So it's definitely on iHeartRadio and Audible, Amazon Prime, Stitcher, all the Spotify. It's on there as well. So if you have, have accounts with any of those or whatever, you can listen to it for free, of course, anywhere you want. So it's very available that way if you'd like to do that. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. You just look up my name. It's just Joe Peck. You can find me there. If you want to connect, I'm always open to doing that. And if you want to, I don't know if you want to talk about things, I get people. Well, I do post a link to the podcast every week on my Facebook.
Okay.
And then I get, people will comment on it, about it, and talk about it. And you're welcome to do that. I love getting feedback. We do. We love getting feedback, good or bad kind of thing, or
we
whatever
all
it is.
love feedback.
No, it's very important, right?
It's good.
It's very important because we want to know that. But a lot of people I've found really like the podcast because it just gives them a different perspective on things and lets them think about things they hadn't thought of before, and they appreciate that. And I love that feedback, so we want to keep doing it. So yeah, just connect anyway. I'm really open to that. Love connecting on social media, and and just reach out if you know me any other way. You can anytime. And I think you might be able to leave comments on the podcast episodes.
I think so.
Yeah, so you can do that too.
Yeah, they have different sections where you can leave your comments, and we definitely encourage that, because we need to know if our part is valuable out there, if we're making a difference, if you're hearing our voices, and how can we serve you best.
It is, and we, in fact, from feedback, we also get ideas for future podcast episodes too. People say, talk about this or talk about that. We love that, and we do, and we're always looking for great ideas to talk about that. So if there's a gospel topic you love, if there's something about the gospel you don't understand, if there's something you experienced and you want to share that experience, or something you think people might benefit from that kind of topic, reach out, right, and let us know. We'll definitely do an episode about it. We're always looking for great topics that are meaningful to people, and those are usually the best topics that mean the most to people, that people have experienced. That's right. And gone through themselves. So yeah, anytime at all.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you. If you've enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe, share, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram. Please comment, because I would love to hear about what you think and what you want to see in the future. I'm no therapist, but I am your host, Stephanie Goodman.